Travis Miller from Boiler Upload joins us now. Travis, just saying that it is now official that the ACC welcomes Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Man, that didn't take long. They just voted to extend the invitations when I started this show, and now I just saw something that says it's official from John Blau, a former IU beat writer, now covering Clemson, but just sent out a repost from the ACC on Twitter that says the ACC welcomes Cal, SMU, and Stanford to the league starting next season. So there's that, which nobody we'll talk about later at a different time. But
that means the All Coasts Conference now.
Yeah, whatever. That's there. I've said that they still suck in football, so who cares? It really, it's like, so what? Who cares? But oh well. Big weekend for Indiana. Obviously, big weekend for Purdue. Different scenarios, quite different scenarios. Indiana starting off with the juggernaut hosting the number 3 Ohio State Buckeyes to open the season, which will not be fun. We do not know who Indiana's quarterback is yet. There's just so many things we don't know about Indiana. As Jeffrey the Greek called their defense the island of misfit toys because they have so many transfers, which they do, and they've got a ton of good transfers in from schools, Texas Tech, Texas, Auburn, just all over the place. So I don't know what to expect, and I cover them. So I'm just waiting to see what happens and to gauge the team going forward from there. I think that Indiana, like Greek does, gets inside the spread. But that's about all I'm expecting in that regard. But I'm just looking to see where have they improved? Are they better at these different places, specifically the offensive line, which just crushed them last year like a bug every game virtually. And then how can this quarterback handle what's coming at him? So it's going to be interesting to see Ohio State, what they have, because they've got a lot of new quarterback, new things going on. So there are a lot of things to get from this particular game.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I think Purdue's in very much the same boat because they've got a lot of transfers on both sides of the football, especially on defense. You've got 2 transfer cornerbacks, and I have to assume that they're doing well because one of the guys that was the starter last year, he was back and then suddenly just jumped in the transfer portal and left and is now at Mississippi State. And we're talking, he did this 2-3 weeks ago. So it's going to be real fascinating to see. And then this is a game that I think Purdue absolutely has to win if it's going to go to the postseason this year, because there's no gimmies on the schedule except, maybe Northwestern is later in the season. But by then, that's probably not going to matter for a bowl game or not, if that's your gimme.
Yeah, I guess that is one good thing. I guess that weighs in Indiana's favor. They're not playing one of those games that they have to win, that they're expected to win for hopes of making a bowl. This is a game that I don't expect them to win. So they don't have that pressure, at least, and they could get that out of the way. But it is for Purdue. It's a home game, and it is a game that they have to have, like you said, because you don't have that many games in the Big Ten that are, I don't want to call gimmies because there are no gimmies hardly in the Big Ten, like you said, but it does not get easier. Everybody is getting better with the transfers. Now it has changed everything. Purdue having this new offense, so I think that Purdue fans should be pretty confident. You've got a hell of a coach coming over, and the success that Ryan Walters had as defensively for Illinois, and then he brings in, you've got Graham Harrell as an offensive coordinator. So an exciting type of offense. So I don't think that Purdue's going to miss much as far as offensively. The changes, whatever they are probably going to be subtle to the fans.
Yeah, I agree. I think Hudson Card is stepping into a real good situation. The offense seems to suit him. He seems to suit the offense. So I'm not expecting a ton of, real struggles offensively. He's got a good running back to kind of take the pressure off of him. He's got some talented receivers that may not have produced a ton yet because of injury, because they've had a Charlie Jones, they've had a David Bell, but I really think the offense should be okay. But the defense, man, that back four is kind of, it's kind of shaky, honestly. We don't know what we're going to get out of both cornerbacks. And my largest concern offensively is the offensive line. Purdue is still missing its starting center. Gus Hartwig is going to be out this week. He's recovering from a pretty significant knee injury last year. He's expected to be back later on, but he's one of Purdue's best offensive linemen. And in the middle of the offense, that's going to be key. So I'm hoping that they avoid injury. It's going to be nice if they avoid some injuries. Especially at tackle, because there is not a lot of depth at tackle. And if you have one or two of those guys go down, I think Purdue is in some serious trouble offensively.
Well, and you just said a key word that I talked about Indiana too, since this is not a game they're expected to win, but when you're playing against a team that is obviously talent-wise, you can't ignore there's a talent gap between Ohio State and Indiana. Hell, there's a talent gap between Ohio State and most teams in the Big Ten. But coming out of this game as injury-free as possible and getting a gauge on where you actually are, that's, I think, what – and to be competitive. If they can be competitive, well, that's going to give you great confidence. I think that's going to be the best case scenario for Indiana. Obviously, winning – for Purdue is going to be the best case scenario. And I don't think it matters if it's a close game or not. Winning is just going to be winning. Winning matters most. And getting that first win for this new coaching staff is of the utmost importance. Now the stadium improvements, are they completed?
For the most part, yes. The south end zone, they're still working on, I believe it's a student athlete dining facility that's kind of tucked underneath the new grandstand there and everything else. But all the rest of the stuff is done, and it's going to be ready to go. The new tunnel debuts tomorrow, named after Joe Tiller, who it's really about time that they name something there after Joe Tiller for everything that he did with the program. And the new bleachers look
Tiller
great.
Tunnel, baby. The Tiller Tunnel.
The Tiller Tunnel. I'm looking forward to that. That should be good. The new south end zone looks really, really nice. That's where the students are going to be. That's where the band is going to be. I know my wife and son, that's where our seats have been for years. And they're like, oh, great. It's going to be really freaking loud now by us. But, you want that atmosphere. And I think you're going to see a pretty good atmosphere tomorrow. Everyone's excited to see what everything looks like once you get in there. We've seen all the pictures, but we haven't seen people in there yet. So you get a good crowd in there, and I think it's going to help out.
Absolutely. That's another thing I was getting ready to say. Having the newness, it's a new season, but you've got these new stadium upgrades that are now coming together. Is there going to be aesthetically something that you're going to see? I mean, I've been up there for the games and I've saw that they were doing construction and whatnot, but I don't know everything that they were doing. Aesthetically, what will fans see?
It's going to the way that they've designed it is it kind of looks like the front of a cow catcher. Some of the seats are a little bit angled there in the south end zone. I think that's what they were going for. And it's below the, huge giant, the huge new scoreboard that's been there, I think, since the 2020 season. So that's kind of what they're looking for. And then one of the cooler features that they have above the tunnel in that area that they hollowed out, that's going to be the parking spot for the Boilermakers special. So it will be parked in the stadium, kind of in its own, marquee spot, almost elevated like Victory Lane at IMS. So it's going to be interesting. They're going to have like a whole ceremony, I think like a half hour before the game of when the special comes in and parks there and everything else. So it should look pretty nice. And I like that south end zone is going to be filled in. It's no longer just this big tent where you can go and get drinks.
Yeah, and then, of course, winning makes everything better. And so if they are also able to put a win together, that would make things pretty party-like in West Lafayette as they go into next week. Who does Purdue play next week? I don't have the schedule pulled up.
They are at Virginia Tech, which is one of those really, really interesting games. Again, I think it's one that Purdue has to get if they're going to go to a bowl. Virginia Tech was 3-9 last year. This is not your vintage Virginia Tech. They don't have a lot of high expectations this year. And just looking around their message board, they named their starting quarterback, and the general response from Virginia Tech fans was, okay. So, but it's still a road game. It is a Power 5 conference, non-conference road game. Nothing is easy there. I mean, Purdue has struggled on the road outside the Big Ten for years and years and years. They've lost at Nevada. They've lost at Rice. They've lost at Marshall. So I don't think you can take anything for granted in a game like that. You know, I would say Purdue is favored as of right now, especially if they beat Fresno State. But again, nothing is guaranteed in that. And if they're able to get off to a 2-0 start, I think you're going to see a lot of excitement for the week 3 home game. That it's a night game. It's on NBC, and it's against Syracuse, a team that beat them in the final minute last year. That was a game Purdue had won, and it completely
that was a surprising loss,
on
man. Yeah, that was a surprising loss last year.
I was watching that game. That was the day my nephew got married, and I'm watching that as the ceremony is about to start, and I'm just like, oh, great, fantastic.
And getting that 3-0 start is gigantic. I in writing the prediction in the Hoosier.com, that's one of the things I wrote. Remember the days when Indiana would start with that good old-fashioned red velvet cupcake? You'd have Miami of Ohio and Bowling Green and Kent State, and you'd be 3-0 going into the Big Ten and give a little confidence. I'm like, that ain't now. Those were the olden days. Indiana has started against a Big Ten opponent in 5 out of the last 7 years, and this is the second time it's against Ohio State. The last time I think they were ranked number 1. So it's not Indiana. The Big Ten has not helped Indiana, and I think that's detrimental to the Big Ten personally. You're not helping your own product that way, but you got to play who's on your schedule regardless of that. Indiana will have this game out of the way. Then they'll have the opportunity to play those non-con games. They've got games that they're going to have to win, but that's why coming out of this game as injury-free as possible, that's key. If you have a key injury coming out of this game, going right into the games that you know you have to win, that makes life a little difficult as well.
Yeah, especially if it's at a position where you don't have a lot of depth. I know you mentioned that Indiana, you don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback. Well, if you have the starter go out there and he gets hurt in the first quarter, suddenly you have a bad situation that's even worse.
Absolutely. Purdue going back to their Drew Brees era jerseys.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Those are some of my favorite ones they've had over the years.
Justin asking, does Purdue still have that stud from Boonville, the running back?
Oh, yes. Devin Mockabee. He is the starter. I think it's funny how the first thing that Ryan Walters did in that very first meeting where he has the entire team come in as head coach, he gave Mockabee a scholarship. And he specifically mentioned, he's like, you were a walk-on last year that ran for 100 yards on our defense, which was the best in the nation in several statistical categories. That's worth a scholarship in my book. So he immediately gave him a scholarship to start his first meeting with the team. And Mockabee, just such a great story. Came out of nowhere, really. Didn't even play in the season opener. Only played mop-up minutes last year against Indiana State. And then nearly ran for 1,000 yards. I know I do a podcast with former Purdue running back Corey Sheets, and we determined there have only been, I believe, 7 1,000-yard rushing seasons in Purdue history. Corey was the last one to do it in 2008. So that's kind of the expectation for Mockabee this year, is to get that 1,000-yard mark and kind of his goal. And suddenly, if he does that with 2 years of eligibility left, you're looking at a guy that could threaten Mike Allstott's all-time school record. So obviously still very, very early on that. You want to kind of pump the brakes because Allstott was Allstott. But if he finishes this season around 2,000 yards for his career, he's only going to need, I think it's like 1,400 to get to Allstott.
That's crazy. What are your predictions for Purdue and Indiana?
I'm cautiously optimistic on Purdue. I think they get the win tomorrow. I'm a little nervous because Fresno State is just a really tough group of five program. You look at what
Are they
they've done the
better than
last few
Are
years.
they better than 3.5?
I'm with you in that if it's a game Purdue can win, I think they can cover that. I think they can win by about a touchdown, but you just never know late and how things go. And then for Indiana, boy, that is, I mean, Ohio State's a Death Star, man. You gotta hope you have the small thermal exhaust port right below the main port, and Purdue had that with Rondale Moore a few years ago. But you know, is there a difference maker that can get Indiana even close to that? You know, you said what the spread's 30.5.
Yes.
Ooh, I mean, it depends on how out of hand it gets early. Again, like you said, if Indiana keeps it close, that's encouraging. I mean, if they get inside that 30.5, I think that's encouraging. But I don't know, man. I just Ohio State can just turn it on at any time, I think, and with so many weapons, that it's hard to make a call on that.